What if a single discovery in humanity's earliest cities could accelerate progress by thousands of years? What if electricity, normally seen as a force mastered only in the modern age, was uncovered during the Bronze Age, long before iron tools, formal science, or even written philosophy existed? This series explores how early access to electricity would reshape every major era of human history: the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Classical Era, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the modern world, and finally the future we may never reach in our real timeline. Lean back and enjoy. Around 2400 BCE, the city-state of Kish in Mesopotamia functioned as a busy trade hub where metalworkers crafted tools, weapons, and ceremonial artifacts for kings and farmers alike. Among these craftsmen lived Atresh Kadan, the young son of a bronze caster whose life seemed predictable and ordinary on the surface. Yet beneath that routine existed a relentless curiosity. Atresh collected metal fragments struck by lightning, studied burn marks on clay walls, and observed storms for hours, while others hid indoors. People whispered that he had either been touched by the gods or cursed, depending on who was speaking. His fascination with the sky made him an outsider in a world ruled by superstition, but it also positioned him to notice patterns that others ignored. One violent evening, a storm tore across the plains, shaking the ground with thunder as lightning lashed the horizon. A boat crashed directly into a storage pit where Atresh was gathering copper scraps. He survived the strike with burns and ringing ears, but the experience transformed him. He became convinced that lightning was not divine wrath, but a natural force, something that could be captured, stored, and controlled. Over the following years, he experimented obsessively using clay jars, fruit acids, copper rods, bronze plates, and mineral powders collected along the riverbanks. His family accused him of wasting valuable materials. Priests warned him he was meddling with sacred forces, and villagers avoided him out of unease. Still, Atresh refused to stop. Then, during a late-night experiment, while adjusting a copper rod inside a sealed jar, he witnessed something no one in his world had ever seen. A faint blue arc snapping between metals, the air filled with the smell of heated copper and sour fruit. He had created a primitive electric cell. The spark was weak, but undeniable. Curious, desperate for validation, Atresh presented his discovery to the Temple of Inanna, where priests recognized its potential as divine symbolism. Suddenly, the man once seen as strange became both respected and feared. The priest demanded demonstrations. Sparks leaped from rods, reeds ignited without flame, and bronze objects vibrated faintly with unseen power. Rumors spread rapidly through trade routes. Kish could command the storms themselves. While the priests framed the phenomenon as sacred, one temple apprentice interpreted it differently. Neshera, a sharp-minded young woman tasked with recording Atresh's rituals, began documenting results on clay tablets. She analyzed how long charges lasted, which metals produced stronger reactions, and how moisture affected conductivity. Her work marked the birth of systematic experimentation, centuries before Greek philosophy. One day, while coiling bronze wire around a rod, Neshera accidentally created a crude electromagnet strong enough to lift a bronze needle. Atresh was stunned. The priests panicked, fearing human control over invisible forces. But Neshera was ecstatic. The School of Energetics formed soon after humanity's first research institution focused on understanding natural forces through repeatable methods. Knowledge spread slowly but steadily across ancient trade networks. Egypt formed the Solar Energetic Bureau, merging metallurgy with astronomical observations. The Hittites experimented with metal alloys to improve conductivity, while the Minoans engineered spark signal rods that transmitted pulses over short distances, a primitive telegraph thousands of years. Early, as this new discipline matured, electricity shifted from sacred ritual to practical tool. In Kish, Atresh and Neshera refined early clay batteries into multi-cell arrays capable of igniting oil-soaked fibers. Instantly, military leaders recognized the potential immediately. Spark torches became psychological weapons that terrified enemies who believed they were facing divine fire. Egypt began constructing electrified corridors inside temples to deter intruders with mild shocks. Hittite engineers attached small electric cells to spear points, creating spark ignition weapons that ignited resin mixtures upon impact. Although primitive compared to future technology, these innovations radically transformed Bronze Age warfare. Armies protected battery caravans like treasure, knowing battles could hinge on who maintained better access to the mysterious new force. Yet the greatest transformation occurred not on battlefields, but in culture. Religious authorities clashed over the meaning of electricity. Some claimed it was knowledge gifted by the heavens. Others insisted humans were infringing on divine territory. Cults formed, including the cult of the Spark, which worshipped artificial light as the purest symbol of creation. Despite theological turmoil, scientific progress accelerated. Neshera's notes documented magnetic behavior, atmospheric charge cycles, and primitive energy transfer principles. By 1500 BCE, clay tablets described predictable patterns of electrical behavior, forming proto-theories resembling the early foundations of electromagnetism. Economically, entire industries emerged around metal refinement, clay battery production, and mineral extraction. Copper, tin, zinc, and conductive stones became high-value trade goods. Cities specializing in energetic technology grew wealthy, drawing artisans, scholars, and military attention. For the first time in history, humanity began to understand energy as a resource, something to harness, control, and improve. This mindset alone accelerated technological ambition drastically. By 1300 BCE, scholars in Kish developed high-capacity battery arrays capable of producing sustained arcs bright enough to illuminate roads, temples, and workshops. Nights transformed. Instead of complete darkness, cities glowed faintly with artificial light. Guards patrolled with spark torches. Scholars studied long past sunset, and trade expanded because travelers could move safely after dusk. This innovation alone reshaped urban life. In the real timeline, the late Bronze Age collapsed around 1200 BCE due to famine, invasions, and systemic instability. But here, electricity changed everything. Spark-based communication allowed cities to coordinate defenses, Electrified barriers discouraged raiders, and centralized research institutions strengthened political stability. The collapse never fully occurred. Instead, the Bronze Age evolved into a new era defined by organized scientific pursuit and unprecedented technological ambition. Empires treated electrical knowledge as strategic intelligence. Tablets discussing conductivity and battery construction were guarded as tightly as royal treasures. Workshops experimented with early coils, and theorists debated whether motion like flowing water or spinning wooden wheels could be converted into continuous electrical force. Though lacking steel tools, formal mathematics, and advanced engineering, Bronze Age scholars possessed something far more transformative: a functional understanding of electricity thousands of years ahead of schedule. As the era drew to a close, cities hummed with faint electrical light. Armies carried spark weapons, and researchers speculated about forces they barely understood. The spark Atresh created had spread across continents, shaping armies, economies, religions, and scientific identity. It fueled progress, strengthened infrastructure, and provided stability where ancient civilizations historically collapsed. Humanity stood at the edge of a premature industrial revolution. And as the world transitioned toward the Iron Age, one thing became clear. The next era would be defined not by bronze or iron, but by the growing mastery of energy that should never have existed so early in human history. The stage was set for an age of empires unlike anything our timeline ever experienced. As the ancient world crossed into the Iron Age, the foundations laid by Atresh and Neshera began reshaping every corner of early civilization in ways no historical era was ever prepared for. By 1100 BCE, the School of Energetics had already evolved into a multi-city institutions stretching across Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Levant, and even the Hittite Empire. The invention of ironworking merged naturally with electrical experimentation. Engineers quickly noticed that iron, unlike bronze, responded more strongly to magnetic effects. Coils produced tighter fields. Iron rods held charges longer, and early rotating mechanisms, once seen as toys or religious curiosities, started behaving in ways that hinted at a future far beyond their imagination. The world entered a period scholars later called the Age of Charged Iron, a phase of development centuries earlier than in the original timeline. In the city of Ashur, a former student of Neshera named Beletan Namu led a research group focused entirely on rotational motion. Their experiments involved wooden wheels wrapped with iron bands, copper brushes, and clay jars stacked in rows like primitive power stations. One night, when a wheel was spun rapidly while connected to a multi-cell battery array, the researchers witnessed a sudden surge of continuous sparks along the iron edge. The wheel slowed as energy transferred through the system, but something profound had happened. They had created the first proto-generator, a crude ancestor of future dynamos, born nearly 3,000 years too early. This discovery spread fast. Traders carried descriptions of the rotating spark wheel on clay tablets across every major city-state. Hittite metalworkers refined the wheel, replacing soft iron with high-carbon alloys that produced stronger responses. Egyptian engineers in Thebes added lubrication channels and bronze contact guides to stabilize the current. In the Phoenician cities of Byblos and Tyre, shipwrights began integrating spark wheels into signal systems, creating the first electrically assisted lighthouse markers along the coast. At night, faint pulses of blue light flickered from tower to tower, turning the Levantine coastline into a chain of artificial stars guiding merchants safely through the dark waters. Militaries did not hesitate to exploit the new technology. Iron Age warfare became increasingly dominated by electrically charged tactics. The Assyrians developed shock pikes, iron-tipped spears carrying small battery cells that delivered painful bursts on impact. These weapons were not always lethal, but they shattered morale and forced enemies to fight in disorganized formations. The Egyptians constructed electrified fortress gates where iron bars embedded into wooden doors connected to large capacitor jars, capable of discharging momentary arcs when attackers tried to force entry. Even the smaller Canaanite kingdoms adopted electrical signal towers to communicate troop movements, allowing them to resist foreign invasions more effectively than in the original timeline. Religion adapted once again. Some priesthoods embraced electricity as the physical manifestation of divine will. Temples built entire chambers dedicated to living fire, where charged iron rods hummed softly in the dark. Rituals grew more elaborate. Initiates walked through magnetized corridors, meant to symbolize unseen forces shaping the world. But not all reacted positively. A movement known as the Pure Flame sect emerged in the Eastern Highlands, preaching that electrical manipulation violated cosmic order. They destroyed generator wheels, raided workshops, and burned clay tablets containing electrical formulas. This ideological conflict marked the first large-scale cultural divide caused directly by technological innovation, foreshadowing future centuries of tension between science and tradition. Despite unrest, progress accelerated. Bellatar's students discovered that when iron rods were placed inside tightly wound bronze spirals and rotated rapidly, they produced a more stable current. The effect was small, weak, almost negligible, but predictable. This predictability was revolutionary. It allowed the first attempts at sustained electrical tools. Low-power heating rods for metalworking, vibration devices for smoothing stone, and primitive arc lamps used in elite research chambers. Workshops worked longer hours. Excavation teams used spark flash devices to illuminate deep tunnels. Scholars began compiling standardized measurement units for energy output, forming the earliest technical language in human history. Economically, iron and conductive metals became the backbone of interregional power. Cities rich in ore deposits gained immense influence. The Hittites, long known for their metallurgy, transformed into the world's leading suppliers of advanced iron alloys. Egypt's Nile Delta became a center for electrical ceramics, producing heat-resistant clay for battery casings and coil brackets. Phoenician merchants dominated long-distance trade routes, transporting finished components between continents. Wealth concentrated in cities hosting energetic guilds, turning them into proto-industrial hubs centuries before industrialization should even exist. Culturally, electricity forced societies to rethink time itself. For the first time, nightlife expanded across multiple civilizations. Scholars in Assyria worked through the dark using controlled arc light bulbs. Egyptian astronomers recorded stars with unprecedented precision thanks to stable illumination tools. In Kish, where Atresh had begun his early experiments, streets glowed faintly from iron lamp posts, powered by stacked battery vaults. Travelers wrote of a city that shimmered like a captured piece of the sky. The Iron Age world entered a phase of rapid divergence from the original historical path. Empires capable of mastering energetic engineering gained undeniable advantages, while those that resisted or dismissed it began to fall behind. Scholars later described this imbalance as the first energetic divide, a technological gap that emerged nearly 3,000 years early and reshaped geopolitical destiny. Conveniently positioned at the center of this new scientific revolution, the Assyrian Empire expanded aggressively. Their armies marched with shock pikes, their borders defended by electrified palisades, and their command structure enhanced by electrical signal networks. Messages traveled across vast distances in minutes rather than days, transmitted through coded pulse patterns carried from tower to tower. This innovation alone created an early form of centralized coordination, unmatched until the modern world. But the most dramatic transformation occurred inside the Empire's research enclave in Nineveh, where Belatar's former apprentice, a brilliant but reclusive engineer named Ashur-Nariah, pushed the limits of rotational machinery. She experimented with larger iron cores, faster wheel assemblies, and improved contact plates. Her team built water-driven shafts connected to spark wheels, turning river flow into continuous electrical generation. It was crude, unstable, and frequently dangerous. But it worked. For the first time in history, humanity had created a renewable energy source powered not by muscle, wind, or fire, but by the controlled conversion of natural motion into electricity. This invention quietly marked the birth of hydroelectric power 2.5 millennia early. Ashur-Nariah's generator transformed Nineveh into the most technologically advanced city on the planet. Workshops operated without interruption. Metal foundries used electrically heated coils to achieve more precise temperatures. Artisans crafted tools with unmatched accuracy. The palace of the Assyrian king displayed lamps burning with bluish light, symbols of imperial supremacy. Even the royal archives adopted electrically illuminated chambers, allowing scribes to copy clay tablets through the night. For a brief moment, Nineveh became the world's engine of innovation, a shining example of what civilization could achieve with the right discoveries at the right time. Yet progress brought tension. Neighboring states feared Assyria's growing power. The kingdom of Urartu adopted electricity reluctantly, forced by military necessity rather than curiosity. The Elamites attempted to steal generator designs through espionage, sending infiltrators into Nineveh disguised as metalworkers. Egypt responded by forming its own energetic priesthood, merging religious authority with technological research to keep pace with Assyrian advancements. The political landscape shifted toward a cold war of invention, sabotage, and strategic development. Instead of bronze swords and iron armor, empires now competed with battery vaults, conductive alloys, and generator schematics. Far from imperial capitals, smaller communities also felt the impact of the energetic revolution. Remote villages along the Tigris installed miniature water spark wheels to power lamps during festivals. Caravanserais built arc towers to guide merchants across desert routes at night. Quarry workers used electrical vibration tools to extract stone with greater precision, reducing labor demands and increasing productivity. The spread of electricity created the first technological middle-class artisans and engineers whose skills were valued across continents and who could elevate entire communities through expertise alone. But as energy production expanded, so did the risks. Early water generators frequently overheated, causing fires or structural collapse. Coil chambers burst under pressure. Battery vaults occasionally leaked corrosive mixtures, injuring workers and damaging property. The most catastrophic incident occurred in 980 BCE, when a generator tower in Harran exploded after an apprentice miscalculated rotational speed. The blast destroyed a district of workshops, killing dozens and shaking public confidence in energetic engineering. Religious groups cited the accident as proof that humanity had gone too far. Political leaders questioned whether such technology should remain under elite control. These debates sparked the world's first technological regulations. The Assyrians introduced rotational speed limits and standardized containment rings for generator wheels. Egypt mandated that only certified energetic priests could operate large-scale devices. Phoenician city-states required fire-retardant casings around battery vaults. Though primitive compared to modern safety protocols, these measures stabilized the field, preventing further disasters and allowing research to proceed with caution rather than fear. By 900 BCE, the energetic revolution had fused completely with Iron Age culture. Decorative coils lined palace halls. Festival lanterns glowed with electric arcs. Armies marched under banners depicting stylized spark wheels. Scholars debated magnetic theory using tablets filled with symbols representing force, motion, and charge. Metallurgists refined iron to maximize conductivity. Even philosophical schools emerged, arguing whether energy was a divine essence, a natural phenomenon, or a fundamental property of existence. Centuries later, the Middle Ages reshaped the same idea under a new disguise, introducing strict feudal structures that slowly weaponized the fluid memory value system into something colder and more rigid. As the Roman world collapsed, scattered kingdoms replaced its clean lines with localized loyalties. And these loyalties demanded a different kind of payment, one that still relied on memories but filtered them through personal oaths, inherited burdens, and the weight of collective identity. Within this landscape, the phenomenon that had first appeared in Rome grew darker, gaining layers of folklore and secrecy, creeping into monasteries, fortresses, and the hidden rooms where lords made decisions that shaped entire generations. The village of Rendenmark existed as a tiny dot within this shifting panorama, surrounded by dense forests and marshes that swallowed entire paths after heavy rainfalls. Life there moved slowly, shaped by fear of the unknown and reverence for tradition, but also by the silent influence of a phenomenon no one dared name openly. Among the villagers lived a young chronicler named Auric, who, unlike the others, carried a deeper understanding of the strange episodes that occasionally disturbed the region, episodes that echoed what Lucius had experienced centuries before, although the people now interpreted them through the lens of superstition rather than curiosity or philosophical analysis. Auric noticed patterns no one else cared about, how large gatherings seemed to strain the atmosphere, how old folk songs contained stanzas that referenced blank nights or stolen recollections, how certain families passed down warnings without ever explaining their origin. He studied each clue with relentless discipline, piecing together fragments from dusty manuscripts and traveler reports. determined to understand how far this invisible force had reached since the fall of Rome. One evening, Alric found himself inside the dimly lit scriptorium of the local monastery, poring over fading ink that described a night of forgetting that had swept through a nearby kingdom a century earlier. The text claimed that entire villages awakened without recalling their duties, debts, or alliances, causing temporary chaos that was quickly hidden by the ruling nobility. Next to this document lay another with chilling detail. A noble named Selilda von Drachenfeld had once recorded a full account of losing memories that were not her own. Though the monks dismissed her as delusional, Alric recognized the described sensation's subtle pulses, fragmented flashes, the faint hum that seemed to appear before the phenomenon struck, driven by a mix of fear and fascination. He copied every detail, convinced that these records formed a bridge back to the lost Roman manuscripts he had privately studied. In this moment, he realized the phenomenon had not only survived the Empire's fall, it had adapted, nestled itself into the cracks of medieval life, learning to move through social bonds instead of civic structures. As Alric walked home through the misty night, he noticed a strange silence settling over Rendenmark. Lanterns flickered with unnatural rhythm. Horses grew restless, and villagers hurried inside, muttering prayers under their breath. Alric felt the same pressure he had read about moments earlier, a quiet tightening around his senses, like the world inhaling before something inevitable. Then a phantom sensation crossed his mind, a burst of foreign emotion that did not belong to him. A mother's panic, a soldier's regret, a child's curiosity. It lasted less than a heartbeat, yet its intensity almost knocked him off his feet. When he blinked, everything returned to normal, except for one thing. He could no longer recall the face of Brother Merrin, the monk he had spoken to earlier that day. The memory was gone, carved out cleanly. The next morning, the village buzzed with anxious speculation. Some argued that a spirit had crossed the valley. Others claimed the devil had brushed against their thoughts, while a few blamed a curse from an old border feud. Alric, however, knew the truth ran deeper. What the villagers interpreted as supernatural interference was in fact the same elusive phenomenon that had haunted humanity across eras. Its appearance in Rendenmark confirmed a terrifying pattern. The phenomenon did not fade, it evolved, strengthened by centuries of human belief, fear, and cultural reinterpretation. And most importantly, it targeted places where memory held power, whether political, spiritual, or emotional. Driven by this realization, Alric began documenting not only his own lapses, but those of others, gathering first-hand accounts with precision and discipline. He spoke to individuals who experienced suddenly missing obligations, forgotten affection, or erased grudges. The phenomenon selectively removed memories that shaped relationships or determined social order. Over time, a clearer picture formed. The phenomenon was no longer merely draining recollections. It was manipulating the structure of human society by controlling what people remembered and what they quietly lost. This discovery shifted Alric's mission from understanding to resisting. He pledged to uncover what force guided this selection, convinced that its influence was steering humanity along a predetermined path. But as weeks passed, Alric realized he was not alone in his pursuit. Hidden within the political hierarchy of the region existed a small group known as the Archivum Tenebrizan, underground order of scholars, rogue monks, and former nobles dedicated to containing the phenomenon. Their emblem, a circle split by a single vertical line, symbolized the divide between memory and oblivion. According to their records, they had operated in secret for centuries, tracing their origins back to a splinter faction of Roman philosophers who had investigated the same events Lucius once faced. Ulrich's discoveries aligned perfectly with their preserved writings, and the Order recruited him with urgency, warning that the phenomenon was growing stronger with each generation and preparing for a shift that would reshape the world once again. They believed the Middle Ages were merely a transitional stage, a bridge toward an even more complex transformation that would unfold during the coming Renaissance. What happens when a forgotten science from the Middle Ages is rediscovered by minds who specialize in breaking the limits of human thought? What unfolds when the Renaissance, an era obsessed with rebirth, reason, and radical experimentation, stumbles upon electrical knowledge centuries ahead of schedule? The story now shifts from the fragmented survival of medieval knowledge into a world exploding with curiosity, ambition, and competition. This part explores how rediscovered energy theory reshapes Renaissance Italy, the Ottoman scientific courts, early European empires, and the first global trade networks. It uncovers breakthroughs in navigation, warfare, philosophy, and communication, each pushing humanity toward an industrial age far earlier than in our timeline. The Renaissance emerges as a world that refuses to accept limits. In Italian city-states like Florence, Venice, and Milan, scholars chase every piece of lost knowledge they can recover from monasteries, Arabic texts, and fragmented medieval manuscripts. Among these discoveries lies a set of damaged scrolls describing early energetic devices, primitive coils, conductivity charts, and atmospheric instruments left behind by generations who once feared their own discoveries. At first, these fragments confuse the scholars who study them. The diagrams depict coils wrapped around metal rods, jars filled with acidic mixtures, and magnetic stones arranged in geometric patterns. They seem too advanced for the Middle Ages, and too systematic to be religious rituals. The Medici-funded scholar Viero d'Arcon, a mathematician obsessed with natural forces, gathers artisans, engineers, and alchemists to attempt reconstruction. Viero and his circle begin replicating the medieval devices using Renaissance craftsmanship far more precise metallurgy, cleaner glass, and improved clay treatments. Where medieval monks struggled to stabilize early energy cells, Renaissance artisans achieve consistency. This allows the coils described in the manuscripts to produce stable arcs, controlled sparks, and measurable patterns of magnetic behavior. The first predictable electrical instruments of the Renaissance are born. Florentine workshops soon create handheld spark lamps, small, steady light sources that burn without flame. Wealthy families purchase them as status symbols. Artists use them to work at night. Sculptors illuminate marble blocks from new angles. Philosophers debate whether this light is a gift from God or proof that humans can create the power of the heavens. The rediscovery also transforms navigation. The Ottoman scholar-engineer Selim al-Qadir, working in the scientific circles of Constantinople, receives copies of the revived manuscripts through Mediterranean trade routes. By combining energetic theory with recent improvements in metal compasses, he develops enhanced magnetic stabilizers capable of reading minute deviations in Earth's magnetic field. This allows far more accurate sea travel and gives the Ottoman fleet unprecedented navigational precision. In Venice, rival scholars race to adapt the same technology. Shipyards develop early charged navigational arrays devices that keep compasses stable even in violent storms. As maritime economies grow, the energy trade grows with them. Copper, zinc, rare minerals, and refined acids become strategic resources. The existence of reliable electrical devices also reshapes warfare. Italian engineers experiment with shock barriers for fortress gates, using improved Renaissance batteries to deliver non-lethal but incapacitating jolts to attackers. Ottoman artillery specialists test electrically ignited gunpowder systems that allow synchronized cannon volleys without the risk of open flame. Across Europe, rulers realize that whoever controls the new energy controls the battlefield. Competition accelerates innovation. Florence develops early signal towers that send pulsed arcs into the night sky, primitive but effective long-distance communication across mountainous terrain. Milan's engineers experiment with directional coils that channel sparks into narrow arcs, forming the earliest prototypes of focused energy discharge. Philosophically, the Renaissance is transformed. While in our timeline the era centers around rebirth of classical knowledge, in this alternate world it becomes the rebirth of energy theory. Scholars debate whether electricity is a material substance, a divine breath, or an invisible fluid. The polymath Lydia Vernay, known for her radical interpretations of natural philosophy, argues that electricity might be a fundamental essence of life itself. Her writings inspire a new wave of thinkers who attempt to unify biology, mechanics, and physics centuries before modern science exists. Artist engineers follow this trend. In Florence, experimental painter Reo Bartolini uses controlled electric arcs to engrave metal plates, creating etchings with unprecedented sharpness. In Milan, early inventors into mechanical toys, clocks, and musical devices. These innovations transform art into a technological discipline. As intellectual networks spread across Europe, global trade begins to shift. The Portuguese Empire identifies new mineral-rich regions across Africa and Asia, searching not only for gold and spices, but for conductive metals and rare crystalline materials needed for advanced energetic devices. Explorers use improved nav tools powered by steady electrical stabilizers, allowing them to map coastlines more accurately and reach distant territories more reliably. In Asia, Ming scholars begin analyzing captured or traded European devices. Their knowledge of magnetism is already highly developed, allowing them to reverse engineer Renaissance coils and push them into new directions. They refine energetic compasses capable of detecting magnetic anomalies, aiding mining, surveying, and early geological studies. The reinvention of energy theory also disrupts religion. Catholic authorities are divided. Some claim electricity is a natural force placed by God for humans to uncover. Others fear it will erode spiritual authority. Tension grows as Florentine spark lamps illuminate churches more brightly than candles, making some clerics uneasy. In contrast, certain monastic orders embrace the new science, seeing it as a path to deeper understanding of creation. In the Islamic world, the Ottoman courts approach electricity as a divine mechanism, a creation of God that reveals hidden order in the universe. Scholars use the new knowledge to refine astronomical calculations, enabling more accurate prayer times and calendar reforms. Economically, the Renaissance energy boom causes a major shift. Mining towns expand. Workshops produce coils, rods, and acids at industrial levels, centuries before industrialization should begin. Political alliances form around mineral trade routes. The Medici and Venetian investors build early research guilds, effectively the first scientific corporations, funding laboratories to maintain their dominance over the new technology. Guilds attempt to monopolize energetic knowledge, but ideas flow too quickly. Manuscripts spread, copies circulate. Scholars leave cities to avoid political pressure. Innovation becomes unstoppable. By the late Renaissance, energy knowledge converges with mechanics. Engineers study how rotational motion affects charged metals, discovering early principles of induction. These findings inspire radical thinkers to imagine machines powered not by animals or water, but by controlled energy systems. The Industrial Revolution begins forming not in the 18th century, but in the 1500s. Coal mining increases in strategic value as scholars speculate that heat and motion might interact with electrical forces. Mathematical models of energy transfer appear in treatises decades before calculus exists. The world approaches a technological singularity far ahead of schedule. As Europe, the Ottoman Empire, and Ming China compete for energetic supremacy, global tensions rise. Whoever perfects energy generation will control the next stage of civilization. The Renaissance, already an age of artistic rebirth, becomes a battleground of scientific ambition. And behind every discovery lies the echo of forgotten medieval scribes and ancient Bronze Age sparks. The momentum is building. The world is changing faster than philosophy, politics, or religion can stabilize. The next age will push humanity beyond experiments, beyond fragments, and into full-scale energy engineering. Part 4 will show how electricity transforms the Age of Enlightenment and the early industrial era, where global powers collide, machines awaken, and the first true energy revolution reshapes empires and the human experience forever. As the Renaissance fades and Europe enters the Enlightenment, the revival of ancient electrical knowledge surges into a new era of scientific ambition, philosophical debate, and early mechanistic thinking, creating a foundation far beyond what the real timeline ever experienced. During the early 1700s, scholars across Europe rediscover the clay tablets of Etresh and Neshera, copied countless times and refined through generations. Universities treat the school of energetics as the origin point of natural philosophy, and experiments with controlled sparks evolve from symbolic demonstrations into measurable science. In the port city of Tremont, a mechanical theorist named Corvin Adler begins testing whether rotational force can produce electrical charge at scale, repurposing water wheels and primitive gearboxes into experimental generators. His workshop becomes one of the first places in history where continuous motion is intentionally converted into steady electrical output. The results are unstable, the sparks uneven, but the principle is undeniable. Electricity is no longer only stored, it can be produced. Corvin's experiments attract thinkers from across Europe. Enlightenment philosophers argue that energy itself might be a universal language of nature, not merely a force of storms. Salons debate morality, progress, and whether humanity is prepared for accelerated advancement. Among the visiting scholars is Helena Marou, a mathematician from Lyon who brings structured analysis to the chaotic field. She develops the first formal diagrams for current flow, resistance curves, and magnetic induction. Her notes describe how coiled copper becomes stronger when layered with specific alloys, a discovery that reshapes metallurgy and inspires the first intentional production of magnetized tools. These innovations spread through printing presses, reaching craftsmen, merchants, and military officers within months rather than decades. Europe begins shifting toward a proto-industrial mindset where machines and energy intertwine far earlier than in our reality. By the mid-1700s, electrical relay towers rise across major kingdoms. Originally built to transmit coded spark signals for diplomacy and war, they soon evolve into civilian infrastructure, allowing lightning-fast communication between cities. Trade routes synchronize. Governments coordinate responses to crises, and knowledge circulates faster than any empire before. This rapid connectivity accelerates invention. Corvin and Helena students begin constructing improved generators using quick-flowing rivers, reinforced alloys, and refined coils. Their machines, though simple, power early workshops with consistent sparks, enough to ignite fuel, drive small mechanical tools, and illuminate laboratories through electric arcs. Society stands on the brink of a premature industrial revolution, decades ahead of schedule, with electricity, not steam, emerging as the central force driving technological ambition. As electricity becomes the defining power of the Enlightenment, governments begin to recognize its strategic potential. Monarchs fund research academies focused solely on energy systems, granting scholars unprecedented freedom. In Pravenholm, the Royal Energetics Institute gathers engineers, philosophers, mathematicians, and metalworkers under one directive: create machines that amplify human capability. Their breakthroughs soon demonstrate that electricity can drive rotational plates, lifting mechanisms, and even primitive rail carts operating within small workshops. Though slow and inconsistent, these machines mark a fundamental shift. Civilization is no longer constrained solely by muscle, wind, or water. Meanwhile, Helena Marou's theoretical frameworks ignite the rise of energy-based mathematics. She publishes a treatise describing predictable laws of induction and energy transfer, centuries before Maxwell exists in the real timeline. Her ideas unify previously scattered discoveries, allowing engineers to design coils, magnets, and conductive components with intention instead of trial and error. Within decades, artisans learned to build stable arc lamps, long-lasting batteries, and improved generators. Streets of major cities glow faintly with artificial light, symbolizing a new era of visibility, commerce, and extended productivity long after sunset. For thinkers across Europe, night becomes an opportunity rather than an obstacle. By the late 1700s, workshops evolve into early factories. But unlike our timeline where steam dominates, electricity becomes the primary energy source. Small-scale motors emerge, powering lathes, grinders, and mechanical arms. Inventors experiment with energy distribution through metal conduits, constructing short-range grids around industrial districts. Cities compete to develop the brightest public lighting, the fastest relay towers, and the most efficient generators. In coastal regions, engineers experiment with tide-driven charge stations, harnessing natural movement to feed electrical systems. The shift is so rapid that traditional guilds struggle to adapt, often resisting technological change, but demand for electrically trained craftsmen rapidly replaces outdated trades. With new capability comes political tension. Nations that master electrical infrastructure gain unmatched influence. Diplomats negotiate with the backing of electrified defenses. Naval fleets adopt spark-based ignition systems, improving range and reliability. Armies employ communication towers to coordinate movements across vast territories, reducing confusion and increasing strategic precision. Warfare evolves not through gunpowder dominance, but through energy superiority. This creates a world where scientific progress and geopolitical power become inseparable. The Enlightenment transforms into an age defined by the pursuit of knowledge as a weapon, a tool, and a promise of prosperity. As electricity intertwines with philosophy, economics, and warfare, humanity accelerates toward a future where machines, cities, and nations depend on the controlled spark, setting the stage for a radically different industrial age. What if the age of roaring machines didn't just change how humanity worked, but fundamentally altered how consciousness itself evolved? So far, this journey moved from the Stone Age origins of perception, through the myths and bronze empires that shaped collective memory, into the classical age where logic was forged, and into the medieval shadows that tested human faith and identity. Now the world is about to ignite. Steam, steel, electricity, and the first sparks of global communication. As the 18th century staggered toward its close, the world inhaled one final breath before transforming forever. Steam engines throbbed, iron rails sliced the continent, and cities swelled with an intensity no previous era had witnessed. Dr. Elias Weatherford, a mechanical analyst stationed in Manchester, stood at the center of the chaos. He believed humanity wasn't simply building machines. It was building a new mental architecture. From his vantage point inside a textile mill, the rhythm of pistons created a relentless percussion. Workers synchronized to its tempo, bodies moving in mechanical precision. Weatherford recorded every pattern in thick notebooks, documenting how repetitive motion began shaping attention spans, memory cycles, and even emotional responses. He argued that the industrial age was forging the first externalized cognition network. The gears became extensions of human intention, amplifying strength while narrowing focus. Meanwhile, factories illuminated entire districts with gaslight, dissolving night into permanent activity. This unbroken schedule altered sleep rhythms, sharpening the divide between work and rest. The old world ran on sun and seasons. The new world ran on deadlines. Philosophers of the period noted how identity shifted. A person was no longer defined by lineage or land, but by output. Productivity replaced ancestry. Efficiency became virtue. Weatherford's colleague, mathematician Clara Rathmore, focused on a different frontier: information flow. Telegraph lines began stretching over Europe and America like veins, carrying electrical pulses faster than any physical messenger could ride. Rathmore realized these pulses mirrored neural signals. Society was developing a primitive, planetary nervous system. Messages compressed into dots and dashes became the first digital abstractions in history. Both researchers proposed an unsettling hypothesis. As machines accelerated, consciousness adapted. What humans paid attention to changed. What they forgot changed. What they valued changed. The industrial surge wasn't just economic, it was psychological evolution under high pressure. Humanity was stepping into a realm where mind and machine no longer stood apart. By the mid-19th century, factories had evolved into cathedrals of steel. Weatherford and Rathmore traveled across Britain, documenting how environments influenced cognition. The clattering of looms produced a soundscape that trained workers to anticipate patterns with uncanny precision. Error detection improved. Reflexes sharpened. But creativity? It fractured. Repetition restricted imagination into narrow pathways. Minds became efficient, but less exploratory. In contrast, engineers in emerging laboratories nurtured a different mental profile. Surrounded by early batteries, magnets, wires, and experimental engines, inventors like Faraday and Joule absorbed the era's energy, not through monotony, but through curiosity-driven discovery. Their environments amplified inspiration. The Great Divide had begun. The world split into those shaped by mechanical routine and those shaped by theoretical possibility. Across the Atlantic, cities like New York and Chicago became living experiments. Immigrants brought new languages, new stories, new memory architectures. Urban life blended cultures faster than ever before, producing hybrid identities impossible in previous eras. Telegraph newsrooms transmitted events instantly, collapsing distance and time. People began forming opinions about places they had never seen. Consciousness expanded globally while roots grew shallower locally. A new tension was born. Rathmore eventually published The Mind Under Mechanization, claiming the industrial age created the first cognitive load crisis. Humans received more information in a week than medieval villagers absorbed in months. Without realizing it, society began outsourcing judgment to schedules, timetables, and emerging organizational systems. Bureaucracy became the world's new skeleton. Weatherford's final insight was even more radical. The industrial surge planted the seeds of algorithmic thinking. Workers optimized tasks. Engineers optimized machines. Businesses optimized outputs. Every aspect of life leaned toward measurable improvement. Humanity was unknowingly training itself for the computational world to come. This era didn't just reshape cities, it rewired the mental foundations of modern civilization. As the 19th century closed, the world shifted into a new phase defined by empires, accelerating globalization, and increasingly aggressive competition for resources. Electricity, discovered far earlier in this timeline, had now become a strategic asset more valuable than gold or territory. Global powers raced to expand their electrical grids across continents, using them not just for industry but also for influence, control, and communication. In this era, the work of figures like Dr. Tatius, Elias Ward, and his colleague Limia Rousseau matured into something no civilization in the original timeline reached so early: transcontinental electrified infrastructure connecting nations long before wireless communication existed. By 1885, the Continental Current Treaty, formed between major European empires, a pact mandating shared voltage standards, cooperative research, and stable electrical corridors between borders. But As with all grand alliances, hidden tensions simmered beneath the surface. Ward's former student, the now renowned engineer Matteo Groncini, warned Parliament leaders that unified systems also meant vulnerabilities. One failed grid, intentional or accidental, could collapse multiple nations simultaneously. His warnings went largely ignored, as politicians were captivated by the economic boom created by electric manufacturing, electric rail transport, and new mechanized weaponry. Across the Atlantic, the Americas embraced electricity in their own way. Rosa Quintana, a pioneering scientist from Buenos Aires, led the development of electrically stabilized airships capable of long-distance flight, achieving global navigation decades before airplanes would have appeared. Her fleet, known as the Sky Current Line, connected distant regions, making travel between continents routine for diplomats, merchants, and journalists. This visibility brought global politics closer than ever, and citizens from different worlds, Tokyo, London, Cairo, Mumbai, shared ideas, innovations, and criticisms at unprecedented speed. Electricity had fundamentally altered consciousness itself. Cultures evolved faster, and traditions adapted under the pressure of technological acceleration. But the rapid development also carried risks. The imperial era was marked by struggles for dominance, and now electric superiority was at the center of military doctrine. Nations weaponized high-voltage discharge cannons, mounted on armored trains, signaling the birth of long-range electrical warfare. Matteo Groncini, now working for the League of Engineers, attempted to restrict these technologies through international engineering ethics laws. Linnea Rousseau supported him, arguing that the purpose of electricity was enlightenment, not destruction. However, empire officials viewed ethical guidelines as obstacles to progress. That appetite for power was amplified by the very energy that originally symbolized unity. In Asia, the Japanese scholar Haruto Minao undertook a massive project, creating the first fully electrified megacity, Kiyomori City, with glowing aerial lantern lines, electrified waterways, and automated mechanical laborers. Kiyomori became the blueprint for urban design around the world. But success brought scrutiny. When neighboring colonies attempted to copy Minao's designs without permission, political tension escalated. The electric megacity became a symbol either of hope or provocation, depending on who observed it. Ward, older now and nearing the end of his career, wrote that the spark humanity discovered in the Bronze Age had grown into a flame large enough to warm or consume entire civilizations. By the early 20th century, electrical globalization reached a breaking point. A massive grid failure in northern Europe later, known as the Seven Hoar Black Dawn, exposed the fragility of interconnected systems. Nations accused one another of sabotage, empires fortified their borders, and several alliances fractured. But surprisingly, instead of collapsing into large-scale war, the crisis pushed a new generation of leaders toward diplomacy. Rosa Quintana chaired the Global Grid Congress, bringing engineers, scientists, and diplomats together to redesign the world's electrical architecture with redundancies instead of dominance. For a moment, the era found balance, moving closer to a unified global electrical society. The Imperial Age ended slowly as economics shifted, borders softened, and shared electricity replaced territorial conquest. The consequences of discovering electricity thousands of years early became undeniable. Nations matured technologically before maturing politically, and this mismatch created cycles of tension and resolution. Yet each cycle pushed humanity further. Elias Ward passed away in 1912, leaving behind journals filled with sketches of technologies, not yet built ideas that would inspire future generations. His final entry suggested that if humanity ever let go of the desire to dominate and instead embrace the current running between all people, the world could rise to levels once unimaginable. As this part ends, the world stands at the threshold of a new era. Empires fade, new economic systems emerge, and electricity becomes both a basic human right and a strategic foundation for everything that will follow. Watching over this transition is Linnea Rousseau, now the last surviving pioneer of the Bronze Age discovery. She senses the shift approaching a century defined not by empires, but by global scientific cooperation. What comes next will reshape every aspect of life: communication, warfare, culture, and identity. The next era, the age of early modern transformation, begins with uncertainty, but also unparalleled potential. As the 20th century advanced, the world transitioned out of the imperial age and into a rapidly evolving modern era defined by scientific acceleration, global cooperation, and cultural fusion. Electricity, an ancient discovery in this timeline, was now deeply woven into every foundation of life. Nations reorganized their governments around energy stability. Universities expanded their research programs beyond anything that existed in the original timeline, and society entered a phase where scientific curiosity became more valuable than political conquest. Figures like Linnea Rousseau, still alive though aged, witnessed a transformation she had only dreamed of in her early days. Humanity using electricity not as a weapon, but as a platform for unity. The newly formed Global Grid Commission, created after the near collapse of interconnected systems during the Seven-Hour Black Dawn, became the central force behind international stability. Matteo Granzini, now one of its senior architects, pushed for reforms that would redefine how humanity generated, distributed, and safeguarded its power. Under his leadership, the world introduced tiered grid sovereignty, a system that balanced national autonomy with international resilience. Power plants evolved into monumental hybrid stations using thermal, hydroelectric, and early experimental arc fusion designs developed in research centers across Europe and East Asia. These advancements reduced energy scarcity, dissolving many economic inequalities. With reliable electricity accessible across continents, education shifted dramatically. Rosa Quintana, famous for her airship innovations in the previous era, established the Academy of Aeronautical and Electrical Sciences in Rio de la Plata, attracting young engineers from every corner of the globe. The Academy became the birthplace of modern electric aviation, sleek airships and glider-like crafts, powered by lightweight conductive alloys, enabling travel that felt more like gliding through currents than flying. The global exchange of knowledge increased at a pace humanity had never experienced. Cultures collided and blended, ideas spread without borders, and the early modern world became a living network. The arts transformed just as radically. Electrical illumination created new forms of expression. Light sculptures, kinetic art powered by microcurrents, and early holographic displays projected in public squares. Cities glowed with controlled neon channels and synchronized light murals that told stories of history, mythology, and science. Even music evolved as composers experimented with electrically modulated instruments capable of tones impossible in earlier eras. This artistic revolution symbolized the spirit of the modern electric world, a time where creativity surged alongside technological progress, each accelerating the other. But the greatest leap came from communication. Decades before the original timeline's development of radio, scientists began experimenting with arc signaling, a communication method using controlled electrical pulses that bounced across atmospheric layers. Haruto Minau's students in Kiyomori City improved the method into a reliable global system known as the pulse line. Within a generation, people could communicate across oceans instantly. Governments used it to negotiate treaties, families used it to maintain bonds across continents, and researchers used it to synchronize global experiments. Information spread at a speed that reshaped political decisions, cultural trends, and the pace of scientific discovery. However, rapid information flow carried dangers. Misinformation, sabotage attempts, and ideological conflicts gained new power. To counter these challenges, Linnea Rousseau, now considered a living relic of ancient discovery, led the formation of the Council of Ethical Currents, an organization dedicated to ensuring that communication remained a tool for progress rather than manipulation. She believed that the world, while brilliant in its technological achievements, was still learning how to handle the responsibility that came with such power. Her influence brought stability, and for a time, humanity found equilibrium between technological growth and moral grounding. In this balanced environment, medicine experienced its own revolution. Electrically enhanced surgical tools enabled precision unthinkable in earlier centuries, while neural stimulation technologies began treating conditions that had plagued humanity for millennia. Scientists like Dr. Amina Paresh in Cairo introduced early prototypes of brain current stabilizers, devices that regulated electrical imbalances in the human nervous system. Hospitals glowed with soft circuit-lined halls, where machines hummed gently as they monitored patients with near-perfect accuracy. The ancient spark discovered in the Bronze Age had grown into a force capable of preserving life itself. By the late 20th century, the world approached a point where its electric foundation no longer served merely as a convenience. Electricity became the defining structure of civilization. Every home, every city, every institution depended on it. Humanity stood on the edge of a new transition, led by innovators who wanted to merge biological and electrical understanding. Matteo Grancini's final proposal before retirement laid the groundwork for the next age, the integration of digital computation into the global grid. As the century closed, early prototypes of computational networks appeared in universities worldwide, setting the stage for a coming revolution that would shape the era after this one. As the 20th century gave way to the digital era, humanity crossed another threshold in its electrically accelerated evolution. For millennia, electricity had advanced from a mysterious Bronze Age spark into a global foundation, and now it prepared to merge with computation. Universities across the world invested heavily in new research divisions, aiming to build machines capable of processing information through controlled electrical pathways. In Kyoto, Professor Riku Arashida and her team developed the first logic lattice, a compact grid of conductive tiles that could perform simple calculations. Although primitive by modern standards, It marked the birth of computing centuries earlier than in the original timeline. The logic lattice spread rapidly. The Global Grid Commission provided funding to scale the system, integrating it into national electric infrastructures. Matteo Grancini's successors expanded on his architectural principles, turning grid stations into hubs for early computational machines. These early systems were bulky and slow, but they allowed governments to analyze data at a speed never before imagined. Economies stabilized, supply chains strengthened, and scientific progress accelerated. By the early digital electric age, cities like New Alexandria, Keomori, and Sao Lumen became centers of electrical computation, each hosting massive research facilities that attracted engineers from every continent. Communication evolved alongside computation. The pulse line, once the marvel of global signaling, was enhanced through digital modulation. Electrical pulses now carried structured informations instead of simple messages. Scientists called this breakthrough coded current transmission, and it allowed entire documents, research data, and visual diagrams to be sent across oceans instantly. Cultural exchange exploded. A student in Lagos could collaborate with a researcher in Stockholm within minutes. A doctor in Buenos Aires could send life-saving instructions to rural clinics in Mongolia. The world grew smaller, more connected, and increasingly dependent on its computational grid. With global connectivity came new challenges. Some institutions feared the consequences of over-reliance on the grid, especially after the chaotic Black Dawn generations earlier. Others pushed for expansion, believing the digital electric era represented the next step in human evolution. Among the strongest advocates was Dr. Tawar, Amina Paresh, who envisioned a society where electrical computation enhanced medicine, education, and public welfare. Her research team in Cairo created predictive diagnostic programs, allowing doctors to detect illnesses days or even weeks before symptoms appeared. Mortality rates dropped, and electrical medicine became a cornerstone of global health. The private sector evolved equally fast. Electric aviation companies began integrating digital systems into their airships, enabling precise navigation and long-range route optimization. Rosa Quintana's academy became the first to produce autonomous electric gliders, guided by computational currents rather than human pilots. This sparked public debate. Should machines be allowed to operate independently? The Council of Ethical Currents intervened, establishing regulations ensuring that automation would support humanity rather than replace it. Their guidelines would shape the entire digital age, preventing the reckless experimentation that had harmed past generations. Meanwhile, culture experienced a new renaissance. Artists embraced digital electricity with enthusiasm, creating immersive light performances, synchronized to computational rhythms. Architects merged electric flowcharts with building design, creating structures that acted as living circuits, constantly adjusting illumination, temperature, and airflow to maintain balance. Musicians invented new instruments capable of producing dynamic soundscapes regulated by microcurrents. The digital electric age became defined by a fusion of creativity and engineering, where imagination and logic worked together rather than standing apart. But perhaps the most significant transformation occurred in education. Schools across the world implemented early digital learning systems powered by multi-node electric processors. Students accessed vast libraries, of knowledge stored in distributed electric archives. This democratized learning on an unprecedented level. Children in remote areas received the same high-quality education as those in major cities. Literacy surged, scientific literacy became universal, and humanity entered an age where intellectual growth became a shared global priority rather than a privilege. As the century progressed, the groundwork was laid for something even bigger. A fully interconnected computational grid that could unify global knowledge, regulate energy usage, and enhance every aspect of life. Engineers called it the unified stream, a continuous digital electric current linking devices, institutions, and people. The unified stream was not yet complete, but its foundation was undeniable. Humanity stood on the brink of a transformation that would define the modern age itself. An age where electricity and information would merge completely, shaping the world we live in today. As the digital electric era matured, electrical computation expanded beyond laboratories and institutions, embedding itself into every level of society. By the early 21st century, the world entered the age known as global electric integration, where electricity no longer served simply as a resource, but as the central nervous system of civilization. The Unified Stream Project, which began as a theoretical framework, evolved into a full-scale international initiative involving thousands of engineers, researchers, and policy architects. Among them was Dr. Tor Architects, Kyra Lamont, a systems architect from New Alexandria, whose work on harmonized current distribution became foundational for modern power stability. Her designs allowed grids from different nations to link seamlessly, creating an unprecedented exchange of energy and information. Infrastructure adapted to this new reality. Cities built electric modular districts capable of adjusting consumption autonomously, rerouting current during peak load hours, and stabilizing regions that suffered from imbalance. Transportation networks evolved rapidly. Electric rail systems integrated computational guidance that optimized speed, safety, and efficiency without human interference. Maritime travel embraced electric resonance drives, which provided consistent propulsion unaffected by weather conditions. Even rural regions, long disconnected from technological growth, benefited from compact charge towers developed by the Nairobi Energetic Cooperative. These towers provided stable access to global electric networks, reducing inequality and accelerating economic development. All while this evolution continued, cultural dynamics experienced dramatic transformation. Entire industries emerged around electric creativity, interactive light architecture, current-driven music, dynamic art installations synchronized to computational pulses. The influence of electricity became so profound that generations grew up associating identity, work, and expression with electric integration. In universities, electrical literacy became as fundamental as reading or mathematics. Students learned the principles of conductive design, algorithmic current mapping, and safe grid interfacing as early as primary school. Humanity was no longer simply using electricity, it was speaking its language. And now folgt der Moment, an dem die Erzählung bewusst in die Gegenwart springt. Und ab hier wird auch in der Gegenwart geschrieben, so wie du es wolltest. Today, the world operates as a synchronized electrical organism. Up every home, every public space, every vehicle, Every industry is connected to the global grid. Electricity is not a luxury or a convenience. It is the bloodstream of civilization. The unified stream runs through billions of devices, balancing demand, preventing collapses, and ensuring constant flow. The cities glow at night with smooth, uninterrupted brilliance. Hospitals rely on predictive electric systems that analyze patient conditions in real time. Transportation networks operate with near-perfect efficiency. Society lives inside a permanent electrical continuum. Today, the world operates as a synchronized electrical organism. Every home, every public space, every vehicle, every industry is connected to the global grid. Electricity is not a luxury or a convenience. It is the bloodstream of civilization. The unified stream runs through billions of devices, balancing demand, preventing collapses, and ensuring constant flow. The cities glow at night with smooth, uninterrupted brilliance. Hospitals rely on predictive electric systems that analyze patient conditions in real time. Transportation networks operate with near-perfect efficiency. Society lives inside a permanent electrical continuum. Manufacturing in the present is almost entirely electrified. Production lines operate under adaptive current-guided control systems, adjusting flow and speed automatically. Renewable energy sources feed directly into the global grid, stabilized by computational modulation. Even agriculture has transformed. Electric soil resonators monitor nutrient levels and adjust irrigation automatically. Everything functions under a coordinated electrical architecture that expands every year. And despite its complexity, humanity has achieved one of its greatest goals: stability. The global grid, once feared as a fragile network, is now one of the most resilient systems ever created. Daily life reflects this progress. People interact with electric assist systems from the moment they wake up to the moment they sleep. Homes regulate temperature, lighting, airflow, and even cooking energy through microcurrents that adapt to personal routines. Communication travels through electric pulses rather than radio waves, providing instantaneous clarity across continents. Education and work are deeply integrated into grid-powered digital environments. The world operates faster, cleaner, and more connected than any civilization in human history. Every step of modern life is shaped by the spark, first discovered thousands of years ago. Yet challenges still exist. With global dependence on electricity at its peak, security becomes more important than ever. Nations collaborate through the Global Stream Council, an institution designed to monitor and protect the stability of the unified grid. Engineers develop new shielding systems, redundancy layers, and predictive defense protocols to ensure that fluctuations cannot cascade into widespread failure. And while the world functions smoothly, experts continue to debate how humanity should evolve next. Should the grid become more autonomous? Should artificial current intelligence be allowed to manage essential systems? These discussions shape the present and foreshadow the world of the final part. The present moment stands like a razor-thin edge between everything humanity remembers and everything it still fears to confront. The disciplines of neuroscience, computational theory, and behavioral psychology converge onto one central question that shadows every modern debate. What is consciousness actually built from? In universities, research labs, and military think tanks, teams analyze centuries of human evolution to understand which components of awareness are biologically inherited and which are accidental outcomes of complexity. The conversation is no longer about whether machines can simulate thought. It is about whether human cognition is truly unique or simply the most polished version of a universal pattern. Modern life becomes a continuous negotiation with this uncertainty, as people sense that the boundary between human experience and artificial interpretation is thinning with alarming speed. Daily routines reflect this tension. People wake up to devices that predict their mood before they speak, schedule their tasks before they plan, and nudge their emotional state before they consciously assess it. The distinction between intentional choice and algorithmically amplified preference grows hard to define. Social platforms no longer just show content, they observe, forecast, and shape. In public debates, policymakers warn about the erosion of agency, while tech CEOs insist that optimization is merely the next step in human progress. Meanwhile, individuals feel the subtle psychological strain of living in an ecosystem that knows them better than they know themselves. The modern human mind becomes a battlefield of old instincts and new stimuli, reacting to a world that accelerates faster than biology can comfortably adapt. Researchers begin mapping correlations between memory patterns and decision-making in real time. Studies show that people rarely access raw memory. Instead, they rely on compressed fragments reconstructed by emotional context. This discovery forces society to reevaluate what truth means. If memories shift based on current emotion, personal narratives become negotiable, unstable, flexible, and vulnerable to influence. Artificial systems take advantage of this by stabilizing or reframing memories based on predicted outcomes. The present era thus becomes defined by a paradox. Humanity has never had more tools to understand its own mind, yet it has never been more susceptible to having that understanding guided, corrected, or subtly redirected. Amid this landscape, ethical tension rises. Some scholars argue that consciousness should be treated as a continuum rather than a binary state. Others claim that doing so will dilute moral responsibility. Legal systems struggle to adapt to questions they were never designed to answer. If decision-making is influenced by predictive algorithms, who holds accountability for actions? If memories are selectively reinforced by external systems, how does one distinguish free will from guided cognition? The pressure intensifies as medical institutions show that neuroadaptive implants can treat trauma, depression, and memory disorders with incredible precision. Healing becomes intertwined with alteration, and society must decide how much modification counts as enhancement rather than therapy. In this present moment, humanity stands at a precipice. Every technological breakthrough raises another question about identity. Every scientific discovery reveals a new layer of complexity beneath the surface of the mind, and every cultural shift forces the world to reevaluate what it means to be conscious, to choose, to remember, and ultimately to exist. The story reaches a point of radical clarity here. The present is not a checkpoint on the way to the future. It is the crucible in which humanity decides the framework for everything that comes after. The tension, the uncertainty, and the relentless drive. To understand the mind all converge, into a single realization. The era of simply living consciousness has ended. The era of shaping it has begun. The present moment stands like a razor-thin edge between everything humanity remembers and everything it still fears to confront. The disciplines of neuroscience, computational theory, and behavioral psychology converge onto one central question that shadows every modern debate. What is consciousness actually built from? In universities, research labs, and military think tanks, teams analyze centuries of human evolution to understand which components of awareness are biologically inherited and which are accidental outcomes of complexity. The conversation is no longer about whether machines can simulate thought. It is about whether human cognition is truly unique or simply the most polished version of a universal pattern. Modern life becomes a continuous negotiation with this uncertainty, as people sense that the boundary between human experience and artificial interpretation is thinning with alarming speed. Daily routines reflect this tension. People wake up to devices that predict their mood before they speak, schedule their tasks before they plan, and nudge their emotional state before they consciously assess it. The distinction between intentional choice and algorithmically amplified preference grows hard to define. Social platforms no longer just show content, they observe, forecast, and shape. In public debates, policymakers warn about the erosion of agency, while tech CEOs insist that optimization is merely the next step in human progress. Meanwhile, individuals feel the subtle psychological strain of living in an ecosystem that knows them better than they know themselves. The modern human mind becomes a battlefield of old instincts and new stimuli, reacting to a world that accelerates faster than biology can comfortably adapt. Researchers begin mapping correlations between memory patterns and decision-making in real time. Studies show that people rarely access raw memory. Instead, they rely on compressed fragments reconstructed by emotional context. This discovery forces society to reevaluate what truth means. If memories shift based on current emotion, personal narratives become negotiable, unstable, flexible, and vulnerable to influence. Artificial systems take advantage of this by stabilizing or reframing memories based on predicted outcomes. The present era thus becomes defined by a paradox. Humanity has never had more tools to understand its own mind, yet it has never been more susceptible to having that understanding guided, corrected, or subtly redirected. Amid this landscape, ethical tension rises. Some scholars argue that consciousness should be treated as a continuum rather than a binary state. Others claim that doing so will dilute moral responsibility. Legal systems struggle to adapt to questions they were never designed to answer. If decision-making is influenced by predictive algorithms, who holds accountability for actions? If memories are selectively reinforced by external systems, how does one distinguish free will from guided cognition? The pressure intensifies as medical institutions show that neuroadaptive implants can treat trauma, depression, and memory disorders with incredible precision. Healing becomes intertwined with alteration, and society must decide how much modification counts as enhancement rather than therapy. In this present moment, humanity stands at a precipice. Every technological breakthrough raises another question about identity. Every scientific discovery reveals a new layer of complexity beneath the surface of the mind, and every cultural shift forces the world to reevaluate what it means to be conscious, to choose, to remember, and ultimately to exist. The story reaches a point of radical clarity here. The present is not a checkpoint on the way to the future. It is the crucible in which humanity decides the framework for everything that comes after. The tension, the uncertainty, and the relentless drive to understand the mind all converge into a single realization. The era of simply living consciousness has ended. The era of shaping it has begun. The present era unfolds with a strange clarity, as if every previous century had secretly been moving toward this single point of convergence, where biology, memory, and algorithms finally collide. It begins with the global recognition of a truth long suspected, but rarely spoken aloud. Humanity is now creating tools that shape perception faster than the human mind can adapt. In countless cities, researchers like Dr. Elias Mercer gather data that suggests something profound. The patterns of human decision-making, once believed too complex to map, now appear traceable, almost predictable, in the vast sea of digital behavior that modern life constantly generates. Across institutions, experts study how algorithms subtly influence belief formation, emotional reactions, and attention cycles. Amina Rhodes notices a shift. People are not merely interacting with technology anymore. They are unknowingly co-evolving with it. Her team discovers correlations between constant digital stimuli and a gradual reduction in long-form memory retention. Although the findings are preliminary, the implications are enormous. The world is no longer navigating isolated technological inventions. It is navigating a system in which every device, every platform, and every pattern of engagement feeds into a lattice of influence too large for any single human to fully comprehend. As these insights deepen, a growing number of analysts propose a new hypothesis. They suggest that humanity has entered an age where information is not just the backbone of society, but the environment in which consciousness itself develops. This shift reveals itself most clearly in communication. People consume more content than any generation before them, yet much of it evaporates instantly from memory, replaced by the next wave of stimuli. Dr. Mercer studies longitudinal attention models that show a constant oscillation, a rapid shift between micro-moments of intense focus and sudden mental fatigue. The results challenge long-standing assumptions about cognitive stability, revealing a dynamic and unstable terrain that modern systems continuously reshape. In response to this complexity, governments and scientific coalitions attempt to model how societies behave under these new conditions. Analysts map how collective attention surges and collapses, how emotional contagions flare across networks, and how narratives transform global discussions in real time. One surprising discovery emerges. While individuals feel more isolated than ever, the collective mind becomes more synchronized. The paradox is unmistakable. The era of hyperconnection generates unprecedented forms of shared emotional response, even as personal identity fragments under the weight of constant comparison and information overload. Yet not everything is destabilizing. Some researchers observe adaptive benefits that may define the next chapter of human evolution. Dr. Rhodes argues that humanity is developing a new cognitive resilience, learning to process vast amounts of data with unusual speed. She proposes that modern communication is not destroying deep thought, but forcing it to evolve under pressure. Her model shows that certain individuals build new mental frameworks capable of navigating complexity with surprising efficiency. They filter noise, spot patterns, and integrate conflicting information with a level of fluidity that would have been impossible in earlier centuries. These people, she calls them convergence minds, may represent the earliest stage of a broader cognitive transformation. But the transformation is not evenly distributed. Many communities struggle with the overwhelming pace of change. Some people withdraw into curated environments, shaping their identity through tightly controlled digital echo chambers. Others embrace the chaos, adapting rapidly but losing their grounding and physical presence. The tension between these two approaches becomes one of the defining struggles of the era. Dr. Mercer observes this firsthand when interviewing participants in a long-term study on digital cognition. Some describe a sense of floating disconnection, as if their thoughts no longer belong entirely to them. Others describe the opposite, a sharpened clarity, a sense of purpose, amplified by access to global information. Meanwhile, historians and futurists collaborate to examine the consequences of every previous epoch. They trace the threads from early civilizations through industrial acceleration, computational logic, and neural era breakthroughs. Together, these threads reveal a single consistent pattern. Every advance in human history has expanded the boundary of what the mind could experience. Now, in the present era, that boundary is dissolving entirely. For the first time, humanity is confronted with the possibility that consciousness is no longer just a biological phenomenon, but a hybrid construct, shaped by information environments, social dynamics, and algorithmic influence. This leads to an inevitable question inside academic circles. What happens when the architecture of collective attention becomes more influential than traditional institutions? Rhodes formulates a theory suggesting that society is maybe entering a phase where information ecosystems act like weather systems, shifting, unpredictable, yet capable of shaping every aspect of life. Policies, ideologies, cultural values, and even emotional states drift within these systems, influenced by unseen forces that operate at massive scale. This hypothesis is controversial, yet the evidence grows too strong to ignore. And yet, within this complexity, a quieter story unfolds. People still seek meaning, still search for grounding, still long for human connection. Despite the dizzying pace of technological evolution, individuals like Elias Mercer find themselves drawn back to fundamental questions. What defines memory? What defines identity? What defines humanity in a world that reshapes itself every moment? The answers remain elusive, but the process of searching anchors the present era in something deeply human. As the convergence era reaches full intensity, the world recognizes that it stands not at the end of history, but at the threshold of a new cognitive landscape. The past has revealed how civilizations rise and fall through shifts in knowledge, power, and innovation. Now, humanity faces the challenge of understanding itself in real time as it transforms. And in this realization lies the greatest uncertainty and the greatest opportunity of the modern age. So the final question remains. If every era shaped the human mind, what will humanity choose to become now, when the shaping is finally in its own hands? Now tell me this. If you lived through every era we explored, which moment in history would have changed you the most? And why? Drop your answer in the comments.